Welcome everybody to Martinis with Scott, a show about winning momentum in life and in business. Cheers. I know I'm late to the bar today, but I have a fresh Ashley prepared martini. Damn, is that good. In Toronto today, I'm going to be visiting Novanni next week. I know we've done some shows on Novanni Stainless, and last week I was giving you an update, maybe update number 8, on the turnaround of this company. By the way, if you haven't been following this story, I don't want to go back every week and just tell you what Novanni is. You can go back and surf it, but short story, I bought a stainless steel sink manufacturer in Ontario, Canada. It's a troubled company, but not that troubled. It was when I bought it, but we've already in 2 months made significant progress. Bought it late June, so I consider July the first month and August our second month of operations. Last week I talked about contribution margin and the listening tour that I have been on with all employees, which I'm going to talk about more in a second. And what I concluded was that I both have a need and I can afford to give all hourly employees, so the laborers in the plant, manufacturing, all of them can get a raise of some amount of money. And I know what the money is. I just approved it this morning, but I'm not going to steal the thunder of the notice going out tomorrow for everybody. But everybody that's a permanent employee as opposed to a temp is going to get a bump on their hourly wage, and the temp employees, if and when they convert into permanent employees, will get the same bump. And so that's what we're doing. There's a need for it that came out of my listening tour. We can afford it based on our contribution margin analysis, which, if you're trying to fix a business, is honestly one of the most important things that you can do. So take a look at that. Go back to last week's episode and you'll get some math that goes along with that. But that was where we left off last week because I ran out of time. On this listening tour issue, if you want to affect change in an organization, if you want to make things better in the company that you're leading or whatever your situation is, the most powerful tool that you have available to you in this struggling business is to ask open-ended questions of the employees, right down to the least paid people on your org chart, the most junior people on your organization chart. In fact, if you were being smart about it, you would start with the most junior people on the org chart and work your way up to senior leadership as opposed to the other way around. What sort of questions should you ask? Cheers, by the way, if I missed that before. That's an excellent martini, Ashley. Thank you. Mm-hmm. Normally when I'm in the Fernie studio, I just pour myself a straight glass of vodka because I don't have the talent to make this sort of thing. What kind of questions should you ask? Well, consider sitting down with the employee one-on-one, creating this environment of trust and confidence. Ask them what their job is. What's your formal job title as you understand it? What is your job description as you understand it? And then by contrast, what do you actually do every day? Because they're never the same thing, right? They're just never the same thing, particularly in a troubled company. When you wake up in the morning, what 3 things do you immediately have in your mind for your job that you know to be both critical and solely your responsibility? So what 3 things do you worry about when you get up in the morning that you know are your responsibility and that the organization depends on? Actually, when you get up in the morning, do you have 3 things that you think about, or even 1 thing that you know for a fact that you need to do today that Sinclair Range is relying on you for?
Yeah, absolutely.
So you have clarity.
Yes.
You have clarity in your role. If you can't hear Ashley, she said yes, absolutely, and she has clarity in her role. In troubled companies, you'd be shocked. Like almost never can employees answer that question. They're just going through the motions day to day and doing what they think is best, which is often not what senior management thinks that they're doing or what they're responsible for. So what 3 things do you think about when you wake up in the morning? What is great about your job and great about your company? And what's wrong with the company? Why is this a troubled company? That's what I call a listening tour. When I step into a troubled company, I do that one-on-one with employees at Novanni. It's a small business, but it still might take me a year, right? We have 50, 70 well, not that many, 30 to 50 odd people, depending on how many shifts we got going and what should be happening there. And like, it's going to take me a long time to have a conversation one-on-one, because I invest at least an hour with each one of them. And you know what I'm going to do when I've done that? I'm going to start over and just keep doing it nonstop, because you need to listen to your people if you want to affect change. And if you have created an environment of safety, openness, the people that you're talking to are not fearful that they're going to say the wrong thing, that you're asking for their help. I call it the Maxwell Smart cone of silence. If you remember your Maxwell Smart days, if you're my age, here's what you're going to learn. You're going to learn that in 100% of troubled companies, the work that the employees are doing every day does not match the job description that they were hired for. It's not the same thing, all right? And when that happens, it messes with your org chart, makes the org chart completely useless, and it creates pay inequities. Why does it create pay inequities? You hire somebody to be a supervisor, but freight, shipping, and receiving is not being completed. Your lady that you're hired to be a supervisor is doing the right thing and pitching in on shipping and receiving, except she's making X an hour, and the person who's actually working beside her shipping and receiving is making $8 less an hour, right? So now you've got two people doing the same job at gross pay inequities. Happens all the time. People and the person who was supposed to be a supervisor who's doing the shipping and receiving, this person's okay, she's okay chipping in, but it's not going to last, right? So you've created serious morale issues, and that's a problem with that. You're going to find that 100% of the time. 100% of the time, you're going to find that employees don't know the one or two or three things that are super critical and that they are personally responsible for. And so what they do is they go to work and they make it up as they go along, which is not their fault. That is a management problem. If you're on the podcast, I'm enjoying my martini. That is a management problem, because it's not being communicated. There's not an HR performance review system which drives home what is so critical and why we're relying on these employees. All of this impacts morale in a very negative way. In 100% of troubled companies, I have learned, what the employees believe their job description is and what is important bears no relation to what the CEO thinks that these people are doing every day and what is important to them. I mean, this just happens all the time. I was working on a turnaround company in Toronto from late 2018 to the end of 2019, which is a fabulous success. Sophisticated company, bigger than Novanni, a good Canadian mid-market company in the food business. And I talked to the CEO before we did this process, and we went through all key reports, and then we went to those reports, which are supervisors, and went to all their key reports, and we said, let's do a performance review. I have a template for that. I have a way that I like to go about it. And what are these people responsible for? What are they doing every day? And I asked their supervisor, I asked their leader first, and how often do you think the employee responded in any way similar to what the CEO or the supervisor thought they were doing? It just never happened. And the reason for that is systems and habits and routines in an organization exist, whether you plan them out or not. And if you don't plan them out, the organization makes it out themselves. They just make it up themselves based on what they think is the right thing. This is not attributing malicious intent. There's no malfeasance going on here. They're doing the best that they can based on the information they have, and they even probably made the right decision based on the information they had. But the odds of that being what the CEO wanted them to do and to bring this together as a cohesive team, the odds of that are zero. They're just nil. And so what you find is that 100% of the time, there's a complete detachment between what the CEO or the leader thinks is going on and reality. And I've seen that I've only done, 5, 6 listening sessions at Novanni because then we hit the dead of summer. So we're going to pick them up again next week. But already we're starting to see that. And that's not a slight on anybody. It's not a slight on the employees. It's not a slight on, well, it's certainly not a slight on the employees, but it's not a slight on leadership either. This is just what happens in troubled companies. And it needs to be fixed. And the benefits of fixing it are huge, huge, huge. Here's another thing that you'll learn 100% of the time. The employees are way smarter and way more caring about their organization than senior management believes they are. And the reason for that is that, the reasons that a troubled company is troubled, it's never a mystery. All you have to do is go ask the people and they'll tell you. I mean, you don't have to believe everything that one particular employee tells you, but if you have a conversation with 4 of them, you're going to get a lot of overlap and a lot of commonality of really low-hanging fruit and things that you can fix. And if you talk to the whole organization, wow, you will get such a clear picture from the employees as to what needs to be done. You have to respect everyone. You have to listen to them. They want to help. The employees want to help. If you create an environment where they're safe, they want to tell you what's going on and they want to help. You don't need to know, as a leader, you don't need to know everything. You just need to ask and you need to listen and drop your ego. And you don't need to do everything. Empower those same employees to make change and great things will happen. Here's another thing that you'll find 100% of the time. If you have the ability to step back and take a look at it, you'll find that senior management's diagnosis of why this is a troubled company, if you ask them what's going on, is coming from a bias filter, is coming from a place of bias and through a filter that's influenced by career, self-preservation, pride, ego, right? It's not coming from a practicality, pragmatism, things we can execute on to be better. That's not the place it's coming from, right? They've been through this, they've lost on this decision, they've lost on that decision, and it just builds up this confirmation bias. This is not a Novanni conversation. This is an in general conversation, and things need to change. The hardest thing in a troubled company is getting a leader to admit that what's been happening in the past hasn't worked. It should seem obvious, right? You're in trouble. The bank's coming after you. You're out of funds. It should seem obvious that what you're doing isn't working, but it's not obvious. Why is it not obvious? It's not obvious because there's a confirmation bias, and the confirmation bias is a filter that doesn't, that has an ego that says, I didn't do wrong. These other things happened. There's pride. There's career. I don't want to lose my paycheck. There's all sorts of things going on there that doesn't allow the leadership in the organization to accept that things aren't working and change has to happen. If you're looking for truth, in this company, you got to go down the organization chart. You need to get down to the people that are actually doing the work, right? This is if I asked you, what is the smartest thing to do to get the truth and to get information? Should I go direct to the person that I'm dealing with? Or should I go through 3 intermediaries along the way and play telephone chain and hope that I'm getting the right information, right? That's a pretty obvious question. Go to the employees. Go to the people on the floor that are doing this. You don't like your sales channel? Go to the people in the market. Don't go through a bunch of supervisors. Don't go through a management chain, okay? Because they all have their own agenda. That's not a negative thing. That's human nature. Go to the people. If you have trouble, what you're doing isn't working, go to the people that are working on it. You're going to get the right answer. That's the power of asking, of listening, of empowering and encouraging the team to be part of the solution. All right. So the first thing that I do, not necessarily the first thing I do in a turnaround is stop the bleeding. But when I've done that, I then start the listening tour. Meet one-on-one with employees. I ask the questions that I talked to you about, that I said earlier in this podcast. I get the information and I ask for the good and the bad, and I listen and I try to create, I do create an environment of safety and openness, and it's easier for me because I'm new. If you're the existing CEO, the existing president of this organization, and you've been a tyrant for 5 years, you can't walk into the employee's office or have them come into your office and say, okay, new slate here. I just want you to tell me all the truth, and there's going to be no consequences to you whatsoever. That's probably not going to work, right? I mean, that's the exact reason people hire consultants. I always laugh when people, business people are complaining that they hire a McKinsey or a Bain, whoever, and they pay hundreds and hundreds or millions of dollars to get a report. And the report is really the consultant going to the employees and asking what's going on, and then crunching a bunch of numbers and writing it back to management. Okay, and then people say, well, why did I waste my money on that? Well, I'll tell you why you waste your money on that. Is because you're not capable of doing it yourself. Why are you not capable? Because you can't get over your ego and you haven't built trust with your employees. If you could do these things, you could do it yourself and not spend that money, but you first need to accept that you were wrong. Things need to change. It's easier for me. It's easier for me because I walk in brand new and I just say, look, I don't know anything about this business, which is 100% true. Why don't you educate me and tell me how I can do better, I can have this company do better, and how we can help support you in your job? And I promise 100% of the time, you will get an answer, a positive answer on that. You'll get such a good answer as if you start talking to a few employees, you will set your agenda for the entire year. I've had 5 or 6 of these meetings at Novanni. I have my agenda set for the entire year. All right, so that was sort of a premise, a lead up to a listening tour, what the purpose is. By the way, I did a post on this whole listening tour thing on the Sinclair Range website and on my LinkedIn. So if you'd like to see this in writing, you can go do that. SinclairRange.com. All right, back to Novanni. So based on what I just said, based on the listening tour where I learned that we have a tremendous amount of turnover, it's a serious problem. We've lost the people that are senior and therefore know what they're doing and are properly trained and could help their peers, their teammates be trained as well. We've lost them. We lost them because of our pay scale, but more importantly, we lost them because of a 4-week work week during COVID, which is not the fault of prior senior management at all. They're doing what they had to do to survive, but this was a consequence of that. And so this just come home loud and clear that we're short-staffed, people are doing double jobs, people feel they're underpaid. That's not true. Not that they're underpaid, that we're at the low end of the pay scale. And if you're making $15 an hour or $17 an hour, can you live on 4/5 of that pay? Probably not, right? It's hard to pay rent, hard to eat. We're in a country setting in a small town, and people could drive half an hour and be in a larger city in 2 directions. That they can do that, and they can get a few dollars more an hour. And so that's a lot of what I've learned so far on the listening. There's 100 other things, and I've talked about them on the show, but that's a major issue that I've talked about. And so I've gone through, now that I've started to get some financial reporting, I've gone through my contribution margin, I've looked at my variable costs. If you don't know what that means, go back to a prior episode. I won't repeat it here because it's a long analysis. I go through that, and what I've decided is I can afford to give a raise. So what is the raise going to accomplish? Well, the primary issue here is recruiting and retention. That is the primary issue. Do I want to lose people for a few dollars an hour or $1 an hour or whatever the number is? Do I want to lose them and let them go to Barrie or to Aurelia or to some other city center when in fact they ought to be staying with Novanni, with a team that's winning and where every day things are getting better? And do I want my company that I've now owned since late June, do I want that to be a bottom of the barrel payer? Or do I want to be at the top of the barrel payer? Or do I want to be somewhere in the middle? Well, I don't know, but I know I don't want to be the bottom. I know that for a fact. And so we're going to change that. There's a raise being announced tomorrow, as I said, and what it's going to do on hourly employees, non-temp, so permanent hourly employees, it's just going to change the grid. And everybody's going to get an equal amount. I don't think there's any exceptions to that. Don't hold me to that, but I don't believe there's any exceptions to that. And what it's going to do is it's going to move us from the bottom of the barrel to maybe mid-pack, right? Maybe mid-pack, and that's a start. And I can afford to do it with my margin that I calculated. I need to do it, and it's going to hugely help me with recruiting and retention. Is it going to help with morale? Not really, maybe for a day or two, but people don't have great morale because they're paid more. We've got other things that we're working on to impact the morale. But here's also, on top of recruiting and retention, the biggest thing for me is it's a signal. What is it a signal of? It's a signal that we're starting to win, that things are changing and they're becoming positive. It's not yet another in a series of negative COVID and non-COVID related series of events. All right. So that's what's going on there. If you want to affect change in an organization, the single most powerful thing that you can do is listen and empower the people that are actually doing the work, and do it directly. Don't do it through supervisors, intermediaries, managers. Okay, the rep chain. I've talked about employees a lot, and as if you've been listening to the Novanni turnaround series, you know that I'm been concerned about external reps who haven't been being paid. There's a bunch of back debt there, and I've been going through trying to fix the fill rates on this company, making sure we're delivering sinks and strainers when we're supposed to be delivering them. And now I'm moving into a discussion with my rep channel, and I've had now 2 meetings as of today, by Zoom, of course. Who are you? What do you represent for us? What's the status of your contract? What do you think? What's the good about Novanni? What's the bad about Novanni? And I'm starting to get some consistent answers, just like I would be on the employee listening tour. So this is my rep listening tour, and I need to go through all of those to start to build the picture of the things that we can be doing, the low-hanging fruit, to make changes right away. But I have some early conclusions. Here's my early conclusions. I was thought when we bought this company, I haven't given you any revenue numbers, and I will continue not to give you revenue numbers, but it was a lot. Let's call it 100% of revenue 8-10 years ago. And now, if I'm using 100% as my bogey, now we're doing 40% of that revenue 8-10 years later. Okay, we're profitable. We're break even to profitable right now. So that's all been good, and kudos to prior management to not letting this thing get too far out of hand in those severe pressures. And the answer that I've had when we were looking at buying this company is that low-cost Chinese imports have killed the revenue base. It's already clear from the rep channel that that's not really what's going on. It was going on for a while, but since then, Novanni has lost touch with the market. The reality is, this is not so much a Chinese issue, is that we're having our cake eaten. We're having our lunch eaten. That's the right expression. I'm mixing my metaphors. We're having our lunch eaten by our domestic competitors. Okay, and I won't talk to you yet about who those competitors are, but they have a mix of products that fit better with the marketplace. They have aggressive marketing to the retail channel. They have better database marketing to the contractor wholesale channel. They are receptive and responsive to promotions and discounts. They deliver. We don't deliver on time because we have a huge backlog. So they deliver. They, what else is on my list here? And they have better marketing collateral, up-to-date marketing collateral, and point of purchase displays. And so these are 2 meetings I've had with reps, and that's a consistent feeling that I'm getting. And then, of course, we have a rep channel who hasn't been paid, so why the hell are they going to go out to the retailers and really push our product? So I need to change that. That's what I've learned so far. Bottom line is, we have a lot of hard work to do in regaining our marketplace, in regaining the confidence of our rep channels. But I'm committed to that job, and I don't think it's going to be difficult. The beauty of this is we have great brands. We're Canadian manufactured. We have strong brands. We have great custom products on top of our regular brands and our SKUs. And so every reason to believe that we're hopeful. every reason to be hopeful and every reason to be positive and every reason to believe that this is going to be tremendous success. But success and change starts with the truth and going directly to the market, which is what I've been doing. Sorry about that. Should have that phone turned off. All right, I received an email last week, speaking of reps, from a prior rep. Just wanted to drop you a line and tell you how much I enjoy your martinis with Mike. I'm not Mike. Martinis with Scott. I stumbled on it when researching Novanni purchases. We used to represent them. I respect, I'm just going to say Joe Blow. He's a manager at Novanni. I won't drop his name on air here. It's unfortunate that they were struggling at the time. They had a great lineup, and yes, I was one of the angry reps. So he's listened to the show, and I've acknowledged that we properly, pay people for 8-9 months. They should be upset with you. But in the end, this fellow treated me fairly. I should have been more sympathetic. And then he talks about his father went through the same thing when he was a teen, and they lost their business and their house and their so-called friends, and they all fled like rats from a sinking ship. Anyways, great segments on Martinis with Scott. Thank you so much for that. I haven't said this person's name because he's disclosed some personal information to me, to some stranger over the internet, and I appreciate that. But I will tell you I have a call set with him next week because he has offered, and I'm going to pick his brain. I'm going to pick his brain about what's cool about Novanni and what's bad about Novanni. And here's a message to you in your business and in your life. When you're in trouble, people do flee you like rats off a ship. I've been through that personally. I think everybody has been through that personally. But if you know who your true friends are, if you're open and you're honest and you're empathetic and you don't spin, you don't lie, you'll be treated like this fellow has treated me with his email more often than you think. That's the whole point of the listening tour. It's the whole point of being open and honest and authentic with people. Maybe there's an opportunity with this fellow again based on him reaching out. So I thought that was kind of a cool story. All right, what else at Novanni? My biggest issue right now is backlog. Apart from stopping the bleeding, which is the first thing you have to do at a troubled company, you need to do the listening tour to find out, the truth about what's going on. But the most low-hanging fruit in terms of changes at something like Novanni is to cure the backlog. And the backlog today is bigger than it was 2 months ago when I stepped into this organization. And a lot of people, including some people at Novanni, would say to you, well, this is awesome. We've got a great backlog. There's orders to be filled. I disagree. I think it's terrible. I want my backlog to be zero. Why would it be zero? It's because I'm shipping my stuff out and I'm doing it on a timely basis. At Roofers World, which is another turnaround that I've talked about on this channel, I took over a year ago last April, and their fill rates, this is the rate of delivering product to your customers when you receive an order. What percentage of the time do you send them their product on time? Like within your, whatever your policy is defined. And at Roofer World, I would describe it as roughly zero. Roughly never did we ever ship product on time. And today, and within about 4 months of my taking over, if you put in a purchase order to Roofers World, we're bugging you about when you will accept delivery. We're ready to ship this afternoon on anything in our SKU. We're ready to ship this afternoon. If you do that in this sort of business, I've done it in prior turnarounds as well, what you're going to find is you don't even need to spend money on marketing. Customers are so happy that they're so happy that they're getting product on time or before they even wanted it, that your revenue goes up just because of that. I don't know what we're up today on Roofers World this year, but I'm going to bet we finished the year 30, 40, 50% higher than we did last year based on fill rates. Now we got a little bit lucky because in COVID, one of our primary competitors just seems to have fallen apart, and their product's shit anyways. But they seem to have fallen apart, and we haven't. We're delivering. I worked on a food company, as I said, in Toronto, 18 and 19, had fill rates of somewhere in the 30%. My target was 100%. We didn't get there, but we got to high 90s or mid 90s. Revenue went up with 10, 15%. just based on fill rates, not because we were marketing. And the world opens up in terms of opportunities. Can we accept new customers? Can we look for higher margin business? That's the stage that Novanni is at. We need to fix this. And the first 2 months, our orders have increased, but our production hasn't increased. And so we need to produce more to crack through this backlog. What are the issues for producing more? Labor, we already talked about. That's part of the bump to direct labor to help recruiting. That's going on. Maintenance, which I've talked about before, and material supply, which I've talked about before. We'll see, but that's what's coming down the pipe in terms of, you want to talk about what I worry about when I wake up in the morning? I worry about the backlog at Novanni, and I need some progress on that. What else is going on with Novanni? Restructuring. I've been telling people, I have my list of key suppliers and my list of not key suppliers. I've been telling people, I've told you that this company needs to go through a restructuring. What does that mean in Canada? Here's my choices. It could be an informal restructuring. Restructuring means we're not going to pay all our debt, right? I bought this as a troubled company. There's a bunch of back debt. Company can't afford to pay it. It needs to be restructured. Like most companies coming out of COVID, there's going to be some sort of restructuring. I've done a show before with Sheldon Potter of MMP, where we talked about options as to how to restructure within Canada, which would be informal, notice of intent to file a proposal, a receivership, or a CCAA. CCAA, Companies Creditors Arrangement Act, would not be relevant to Novanni because it's too big of it's intended for larger companies. But I have to choose between an informal restructuring. Informal restructuring means, hey, Mr. Supplier, I know I owe you $1,000, but I'm going to pay you $100 and I want you to release me on the rest of the debt. Or I'm going to pay you $1,000 over 3 years on monthly installments, or some combination of those two things. You're always negotiating for time, and you're negotiating for the amount or some combination thereof, which is what all restructurings are, whether they're informal or formal. Notice of intent to file a proposal is a court-assisted process to do exactly what I just said informally, but with the help of a judge. And a receivership, because I like to protect myself when I buy troubled companies, I bought the first secured debt. I think I mentioned that. Well, I know for a fact I mentioned that to you before. And so I'm the bank. I could literally put in a receiver as a bank would, and I could put it through a restructuring and move it to a new vehicle without any of that debt, leave that all behind. I keep care of my key suppliers in any one of those options. I've got a commodity supplier, I've got a bunch of utilities, I have all sorts of different suppliers who I am going to go out of my way to ensure and to guarantee and to promise that they're looked after. But I got a bunch of back debt that as a company, if we had to deal with that, we wouldn't survive. So I owe people an answer in September, which is what I will be doing. And I don't know what that answer is yet, so I'm going to have calls in the next week about that. But what drives that answer is, who am I restructuring? There's some unsecureds. I talked about a lawsuit with the neighbor over environmental migration, potentially. I've got the former owner of this site, not the last people I bought it from, but the people they bought it from 20 years ago, which is a large U.S. company. I have to deal with them. I have a second secured creditor that's way out of the money, yet I'm paying them as if they're in the money. And so I need to evaluate all those things, and I need to weigh that against my tax losses, because when you compromise debt in any jurisdiction that you're listening from, in any jurisdiction, no matter where you are in the world, if you take a bunch of debt and you decide not to pay it, and the other party agrees not to be paid, that's compromising their debt. And that usually, actually everywhere that I'm aware of in the world, that creates taxable income, okay? And taxable income is then sheltered by taxable losses, should you happen to have any. If you don't, you actually have to pay tax on that, which is a serious problem. But in Canada, it creates taxable income, which eliminates your taxable losses, which are a valuable thing for me because we have other businesses that create taxable income. And so the more I restructure, the worse it gets for me. I win on my right hand and lose on my left hand. So I need to weigh that out and see what the right solution is. I don't know at this point. All right, how are we doing on time? 35 minutes in. I'm going to hold the rest of the Novanni till the next show. I think that was plenty of Novanni today. I want to talk about a story that I missed last week because I didn't have time. I want to talk about McDonald's and a lawsuit in the US. And the reason I want to talk to you about this is critical thinking in business, biased news reporting, hashtag fake news, and what is the right way to fight a crisis? And is McDonald's doing the right thing? Well, McDonald's is terrible about this. Actually, I don't know if you saw on what's that Chinese app, the social media, TikTok. I don't know if you saw on TikTok this week, some woman showed she had stuck like a Big Mac or a quarter cheese or something in her closet for 20 years.
Yeah, I saw that.
You saw that?
Mm-hmm.
And pulled it out, and it looked like it was completely edible.
Identical.
Okay. And what McDonald's did was they issued a press release, and it said something to the effect of, under the right conditions, our food would decay. Swear to God, that was right under the right conditions. So does that, as a consumer, make you comfortable?
No.
No.
Oh,
this is bad persuasion. It's
Yeah.
not the right way to handle a crisis. Okay, so I missed this story last week, but it was a Wall Street Journal last week. McDonald's headline: McDonald's sued by black ex-franchise owners for racial discrimination. McDonald's sued by black ex-franchise owners, ex, not current, franchise owners for racial discrimination. That's the headline. So the lawsuit was filed a week ago, last Monday, in the U.S. District Court in Northern District of Illinois, Chicago, and they accused McDonald's of steering black franchisees to restaurants in undesirable locations in inner cities for years, and those restaurants were destined to fail and often had lower sales and higher operating costs than everybody else, according to the lawsuit. The black former franchisees say their average annual sales were $2 million, so $2 million a year, with $700,000, which was $700,000 below the national average for U.S. McDonald's owners between 2011 and 2016. The number of black operators, let me turn the beeping volume off on this thing. Do you mind turning my phone on quiet over there, please? I should have done that before the show. Thank you. The number of black operators in the U.S. fell to 186 this year from a high of 377 in 1998 because of racial discriminatory processes. This is from the statement of claim. So the number of black owners went from 377 to 186 from 1998 to 2020. And it says that McDonald's intentionally and covertly deprived plaintiffs, that would be the people suing, the ex-franchisees that are black, of the same rights enjoyed with the franchisees. So they didn't get the same deal as other franchisees got, is the claim. The suit accuses McDonald's of providing these ex-franchisees, these ex-black franchisees, with misleading financial information to induce them to purchase the least desirable locations, and required them to invest money to rebuild and to renovate and to fix up these locations in a short period of time, shorter than might have been offered to white franchisees, is basically what the statement of claim says. They're seeking $4 to $5 billion per location over more than 200 locations. So it's a pretty big number. And that is the statement of claim as summarized by the Wall Street Journal, which is important to why I'm raising this story. McDonald's response, it said that, there's less black franchisees now, but we did a consolidation of our stores, and the proportion of black franchisees over the 2,000 U.S. restaurants we have is the same post-consolidation as it was pre-consolidation. So the absolute number went down, but the percentage is exactly the same as it used to be. It said that the former franchisees are suing the company because they retired. It says they're suing the company, but many of those ex-black franchisees are actually people that made a bunch of money and retired and live happily ever after, is basically what their response was. And McDonald's said that the company, it doesn't force you to buy a franchise location. It doesn't say, okay, you can be a franchisee, but you got to own this place. That doesn't happen. They say, here's the locations, what do you want to buy, what do you want to do? And that the franchisees have been free to buy the locations that they bought. It wasn't McDonald's fault that they bought in, quote unquote, an undesirable neighborhood, which required some leasehold improvements. So that's McDonald's response. So what is missing from this story? This story, I read this and I was just like, this is just so wrong on so many levels. Here's some questions that I had that maybe you ought to think about too. Where's the lawsuit from the current black franchisees? Why is this ex-black franchisees? Where are the current people? And how are the current black franchisees doing? Are they sucking? Are they having a horrible time like the ex were? Or is everything fine with it? Maybe this is a whole pool of bad ex-black franchisees. And why is comparing revenue to the national average, how does that make any sense? Like, should everyone exceed the national average? Is that the way this works? And if you do exceed the national average, does that change the national average? Like, could you not always find 50% of McDonald's franchisees who are at or below the national average? Maybe that was more of a medium question, as opposed to an average question. But you get the point. Like, people are going to be below the national average. That's the whole point of an average. No conversation about that. Was this a good investment? What did they pay for their franchise? Was it the same as the white guy in Beverly Hills in a mall? I don't know. Probably not, right? What did they pay for the inner city Columbus, Ohio McDonald's franchise? Maybe it wasn't the same. Was it a good investment? How much money did they spend and what did they get out of this at the end of the day? No comment about that. How many of these employees, and where were the stores located? Who gets to choose where the stores are located? I mean, these are just some immediate questions that came to mind when I read through this lawsuit and the reported article in the Wall Street Journal. And I think if you think about it that way, you can just see there's some serious problems in the reporting here. There's some serious problems in the statement of claim, and there's some serious problems in the way the McDonald's is answering this. Like, I don't get the McDonald's persuasion on this at all. What McDonald's should be saying is, we have X number of black franchisees and they're doing awesome, and here's the stats. That should be the answer. It should be the only answer, right? Anyways, what's the takeaways from this story? Critical thinking. I talk to you all the time about martinis with Scott. You need to ask the other side of the question. You hear something, don't accept it for truth. What's the opposite opinion? Think about it. Ask some questions. What would you ask the people writing this story? What would you ask the lawyer, the plaintiff's lawyer, the ex-black franchisee's lawyer on this? Does this pass the smell test? You need to have critical thinking. Do you really think on the smell test issue that there's a cabal of white executives at McDonald's thinking to themselves, I have an idea. We can really screw these black franchisees, sticking them in bad neighborhoods and charging them a bunch of money? Like, is that a thing? Really? I'm just not buying that personally. But even if it was a thing, even if it was, you still need to do your homework. You need to look at two sides of the equation. You need to ask the questions that I've asked. Here's another point, bias reporting. So years ago, not so much anymore because I'm dealing with mid-market and smaller turnarounds these days, but there was a point in my career where I was dealing with some of the top restructurings, bankruptcy restructurings, and M&A deals in the world. Some of the top ones, certainly in the Canadian market, a lot in the US market. There was a 3-year period where I might have personally been involved. As a junior, I was just like a little schmuck on these deals, but I was on the file of probably every single large restructuring in the late 80s, early 90s for 3-4 years. Everyone that exists. You can read about it in the Wall Street Journal, you can read about it in the National Post, the Globe and Mail. National Post didn't exist at the time, so let's go with the Report on Business, Globe and Mail. You can read about it, and here's what I learned about the files that I was on, is that 100% of the time, the news was 2 weeks late at a minimum, and it was wrong. 100% of the time. Never was it on time, and never was it right. So why do I think that everything else that I'm not involved is accurate and on time? Why do I think that? Where does that mean? Why do you think the news you read is timely and accurate? It's not. Nothing is. There's an effect called the Gell-Mann effect, which is a physicist from I have no idea how long ago, but his name was Gell-Mann. I know that for sure. And he had the same observation when he read news about things that he knew about from his basis in physicist as being a physicist. He knew it was always wrong. It was late and it was wrong. Yet he'd read an article about Palestine and conflict going on, and he'd just say to himself, yeah, I just buy that. I buy that entirely. No problems there. That's not the way this works. The news is always wrong. The Wall Street Journal could have done a much better job on this. There's an excellent example. And why? Because they're influenced by current day media pressures, social justice, all this stuff. The fact that this has to do with Black prejudice at this particular time shouldn't escape you as a coincidence. I talked about McDonald's response. What do you do when faced with a crisis? Don't play that game. Showcase your profitable Black franchisees. I'm certain you've got lots of them, unless you really are prejudiced. I have no idea. I'm not protecting McDonald's, by the way. I'm just pointing out the stupidity of the story and the stupidity of the plaintiff's positions and the stupidity of the defendant's position. If you're McDonald's, find your Black employees, provide some, not employees, sorry, your franchisees, find some real stats and showcase them. I'm sure it's not hard to do. Showcase them. That's the right answer to this. Now, entrepreneurs listening to this show, if you are a franchisee, you've gone through the process, you found a gym or a restaurant or a bagel store like I did way back when, and you're a franchisee, understand this. You're probably getting screwed. Okay, you've signed a contract and you have a franchisor who's not in the business of making your business better, which is what you think is happening. They're in the business of making their business better, right? They're getting fees through royalty fees, franchise fees, marketing fees, and the holy grail of all this, which you may not appreciate, is the reselling of product to you. Do you think if you're running a beauty shop and it's a franchise operation, do you think you're getting the product that you're selling at cost? Or do you think that I, as a franchisor, are taking 20, 25%, 30% or some other crazy number before I'm reselling it to you? I used to be the franchisor of a bagel store. Let me reword that. I used to be the franchisor. We had a wholesale bakery, and I think when I bought it, we had 13 or 14 retail franchise locations. So I was the franchisor, they were the franchisee. I could tell you as the franchisor, we would not have survived if we weren't taking a huge markup on everything, like everything that went through that franchisee's store. That's the business. That's what you're doing. You're creating a distribution channel that you can pump product through, but the risk of that distribution channel is somebody else's problem. That's the franchisee's problem. The beauty of being the franchisor is you don't have that issue. That bagel deal, by the way, was a lot more evil than that. I'll bring you up to speed on that someday on this show. Don't forget, as the franchisee, the responsibility is yours. You run your own business. Do not think that you're sharing the risk and reward of your business with the franchisor. You are not. You're taking the risk. You are taking the risk financially, in your livelihood, and the reward is being shared. That's the nature of the deal. Understand it. Fight for your piece, okay? But build your own business as much as you can. What else have I got here? You know what? I've got more to do, but I'm 50 minutes in, so I'm going to call it a day. Fair enough, Ashley?
I think you're good.
I think I'm good. All right. I'm enjoying my martini. Thank you very much. It's nice to have the service once again as we wind down from COVID. Thank you for listening. This has been Martinis with Scott. We're on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify. Please take a listen, subscribe. It helps a lot. We'll talk to you all next week.